Hello, and welcome once again to a British Cartographic Society Tea Time Talk. My name is Chris Trebutis. I am the coordinator for the Tea Time Talks and today's chair. Today's speaker is Dan Geerah, the partnership lead for the Land App. And today he'll be speaking to us about the Land App. So without much further ado, I will pass you over to Dan, where he'll give us what should be an interesting talk. Dan?
Great, thank you, Christopher, and thank you all for joining, many of you so promptly, which is great to see. So I'm Dan, I'm the partnership lead at the Land App, and it's a pleasure to be invited to the conversation tonight. It's relatively informal. As Chris's slide said at the start, if there's any questions you've got or any comments or any discussion points you want to talk about, please do use the chat function. And there's about 25 minutes at the end of my little talk and demo where we can talk about anything you want. So please do put things in the chat. What I'm going to talk about today is how spatial data can catalyze natural capital markets. And what we've been working on with a number of partners in the sector is a framework for coordinated action. So I'm going to be exploring both the environmental and agricultural benefits that mapping can provide, but very much with a focus on delivering environmental restoration and delivering climate protection. And here's a little photo of me up there if you wanted to see that. So just a bit of a really quick introduction to where the sector is at the moment. Since we left the European Union through Brexit, agricultural payments, subsidies within England and the rest of the United Kingdom have changed. The way that farmers once got paid to to generate revenue and grow food and also deliver other things, it was by area of land. So if you owned farmland, you could claim annually for payments from the government, and that ranged between 150 to about 230 pounds per hectare per year for just owning agricultural land. Now, what you did within that parcel of land, as long as you were being agricultural, it didn't matter, and you could still claim that money. However, since Brexit, that money, stream of money, which is called the Basic Payments Scheme, has changed, and it's actually rapidly decreasing. And you can see by this graph, in 2020. 2.4 billion pounds is available per year for English farmers, and by 2027 that figure is just 0.2 billion, which still seems like a lot, but when there's over 200,000 farmers, they've got to find another way other than growing food to get that income. And to do that, what people now need to do is to start to prove that they're not only growing food, but they're growing food in an environmental way, and they're using parts of their farm to deliver environmental protection. So that's planting some trees around the edges, making sure their hedges are healthy, putting buffers along watercourses. But fundamentally, landowners don't feel equipped for this transition. The previous payments I was just describing have been around since the 70s, and this transition is happening over the next 5 years. And even some of the largest landowners in the UK, such as the Duchy of Cornwall, still don't fully feel prepared for this transition. And that's for a number of different reasons. It's a completely different way of accepting money. It's different expectations as a landowner. There's whole different pressures from people buying your food. But fundamentally, we want to equip these landowners of all sizes, from the hill farmers right there through to the big landed estates, about transitioning and being able to access additional funding. And so just a quick note on this quote, which I really wanted to put in, was it's what Matthew at the Duchy of Cornwall was saying, is that it's going to be fundamental for landowners to have a well-designed plan for what they're doing next. It's no longer acceptable just to be growing food year on year. You need to have a plan about how you are going to improve your piece of the jigsaw as time goes. And what I'm going to talk about today is how spatial data and our tool can help landowners prepare for that. So just quickly, 2 slides on what the Land App is and what it does. We kind of sit in the middle of a very unique situation, a privileged position, where we're a collaborative online platform where land managers, farmers, ecologists, land agents can use our tool to draw plans and to start exploring scenarios of where they want to go. And what we're starting to have conversations with are people on the other side, who are people wanting to invest in land. So people who are wanting to find ways to offset carbon or offset their biodiversity. And what we've what we're starting to create is an online platform where monitoring, metrics, and mapping, the 3 M's, are meeting in the middle. And it's using data from, I know there's a couple of people from Ordnance Survey on the call, and it's great to explore and demonstrate what we're doing with you, plus a whole host of other partners. And what we're trying to provide is this platform for people to come up with a plan, understand what that plan means in terms of metrics, and understand once you're delivering it, how well you're doing in terms of monitoring. And put simply, we are a mapping tool. We're a window into the world of GIS. So we have data from about 30 different partners now, our main one being Ordnance Survey. So we were actually born as a tool out of Ordnance Survey's first Geovation program. So they provided our first round of investment back in 2016. And since then, we've grown as a tool and incorporating a lot more data layers in. But fundamentally, we provide people with the right data to connect with one another, but also make land use decisions to decide what they should be doing next. Is this field best used for growing winter wheat, or could I maybe generate a better revenue from that parcel by going into woodland creation, for example? Other data layers we have on, so actually in this map, and we will look at the land app a bit later on in the talk, but this is Tim, our founder's family farm. You've got the flood zones in blue, and you've got the triple SI that runs down that flood zone in gold. So we're trying to provide an easily accessible tool for users to interact with multiple different data layers. And we've got a whole range of people using the tool. I've mentioned the farmers, and I've mentioned Duchy of Cornwall, but there's a whole host of these customers, we call them, that are people using the tool to do their day-to-day tasks: estate, land agents, etc., and charities. We've also got delivery partners, so those that are doing work on behalf of a client or have got a wider landscape interest, such as the FWAGs and the wildlife trusts and a couple of rewilding charities. And then we're also having conversations with funders as well. So different people wanting to invest in land to see sustainable change, but also what we want to see is people investing in lands, not just because it's good for their marketing budget. We want to see them invest in land because it helps their operational costs. Insurance companies, for example, are a really nice focus for us because, if the house floods, it's on the insurance company to pay for that. But if we can use sustainable land use to stop that house flooding, they're going to have a vested interest, and therefore there's an operational cost in that. And then the fourth and final section, as I've mentioned, is there's a number of data partners that we're streaming their data into our platform, and we can look at some of those as we go through. But that's from government departments and arm's length bodies like Ordnance Survey, but also the more private and research bodies like the British Geological Society and catchment-based approach. And fundamentally, what we're trying to do in this whole process is catalyze a virtuous loop. And you may see on the screen that spatial data is sitting right in the middle of our thinking. And just to spend a minute on this slide, because I think it's quite a nice way to segue into some of the demonstrations I'm going to do in a moment, is that spatial data can help catalyze 4 main elements of the land management sector. Firstly, spatial data can help people quickly and accurately get a baseline. And that baseline is an explanation in spatial format about what do they have. As a farmer, what do I have within my 4 walls? What crops am I growing? How much woodland do I have? How much flood zone do I have, etc. But that baseline gives them an understanding of, as of today, what have I got? What am I currently delivering? The second data layer that we're trying to promote and allow our users to generate is a land management plan, which is, right, I know what I've got in terms of my baseline. What could I have in the future? What should I do to not only be a sustainable, resilient farming business, but to also be delivering my local priorities, local nature recovery, for example, or restoration, but also national priorities. We're trying to hit net zero targets in the next 10 years, and land managers are going to be a fundamental part of delivering that. You can't sequester land through tree planting without having land to actually plant those trees on. So we're really trying to help landowners use their land wisely. We've got a finite amount of land in the country and globally, and we need every bit of land to be used for the best visibility. But it is just worth reiterating here, food is fundamental in the land management system. So we have to find ways to grow food while also achieving everything else. Although some of the metrics say that everything needs to be woodland, it just wouldn't work. We wouldn't be able to eat. So what we really need to do is grow food in the areas that can grow food well and grow it efficiently and sustainably. And then the other areas, the edges of fields, for example, or the less high quality soil, could go into a more nature friendly farming or, downright rewilding. So we're people are on the spectrum. There's people that are really want to go down the rewilding, some really intensive food producers, and what we want to push people along is away from high intensity to slightly less intensity but more nature friendly. And fundamentally what our tool does is then assist them to collaborate with one another and collaborate with experts. That could be showing their neighbor what their land management plan is to make sure that the wildflower meadow that they're planting connects with the other person's wildflower meadow, or it could be something a bit more deep than that, inviting your grassland ecologist into your map and collaborating real time. And fundamentally, if we get that right and this virtuous loop starts to happen, we can hopefully try tying that in with funding. So it's all good and well coming up with a good management plan, but actually if it doesn't make business sense to the farmer, it's just not going to happen. So what we want to see is this virtuous loop happening. And kind of a byproduct of this, even though it's really important, is that spatial data gives us a huge amount of strategy and insight. Every time this circle is completed, we know whether we're on target for that net zero. We know whether we're growing enough food. We know whether people are putting their weights, and that could be down to a national level or down to each individual local levels. Are we doing enough to actually meet the targets we need to? So just to dive into 4 of those nodes really quickly, and then I'm going to, as I'm going through that, I'm also going to show you what it looks like on the land app, because it's always quite nice to see the tool as well as some slides. So that first section is a baseline habitat assessment, is understanding between your 4 walls, what do you have? So what the land app allows you to do is use authoritative data sets. We've got a connection with Ordnance Survey and the Rural Payment Agency and a couple of other data providers for a farmer to get an automatic best guess baseline for their holding. So we can generate, based on your boundary, what we think's there. So we've got all these different data sets, priority habitat inventories and CEH land cover data and Ordnance Survey's master map, all these different data layers. But fundamentally, what we want to do is smush that into a single output, which is, as of today, what do you have? And by doing that digitally, we tick a number of boxes. Firstly, we make it really accessible, so you don't have to be a computer whiz to draw up your own shapes. That's automatically done by people who are, who already created that data for you. The accuracy of it is much more improved, and this is, as I kind of forgot to say that at the start, is that the agricultural sector and the land management sector generally is still quite a lot of it is stuck in the paper-based system. People are using colouring crayons to apply for funding, whereas actually there's technology now to really speed up that process. And don't get me wrong, I love a paper map. I think paper maps can't be replaced, but for applications and for planning, and if you accidentally make a mistake or getting business rules, having it digitally drawn just means that we can save time and really improve the accuracy of those shapes that are being drawn. And finally, I mentioned this as well, as the insight that you can gather. If you draw a shape on a map that says I want it to be woodland with a pencil, you don't know what that intersects. Whereas digitally, if you draw a shape on a map, we can automatically detect whether that woodland is being planted on a lapwing's nest and therefore is ineligible, or it's too close to a triple SI, or it's on a slope of X degrees. There's so much spatial data that when you start to enable planning to happen on top of that spatial data, you can gather a lot more insight and make the decisions better informed. And what we've been doing on this exact point, and we've been working closely with the Ordnance Survey rapid prototyping team to try and enhance that baseline. So as I said in the slide before, we can automatically give a best guess, but actually if people are getting paid for delivering carbon or delivering biodiversity, frankly, a guess isn't quite good enough. So what we've started exploring, and kind of this is a little sneak peek into a pilot we're running with the rapid prototyping team, is instead of just using master map and the Natural England's priority habitat and the RPA's data, which is all being created, but it's smooth edge, it's not as dynamic, we're starting to derive the baseline information from satellites. Satellites, are constantly circling the Earth, and Ordnance Survey every 3 years fly with a plane to do aerial imagery. Now, the question was, can we start to derive a baseline habitat assessment from the images generated from that Earth observation data? And so this is a screenshot, but actually what I thought I'd do is, as my first segue into the actual land app, is just, so this is the land app. I thought I'd quickly just show you what that data looks like, just to hopefully get your brain ticking about possibilities of Earth observation data in this sector. So just quickly before I show you the data, this is a land app. We're based on a web browser. You can turn on data layers. So as I said, you can turn on the different boundaries, designations and stuff, and we can zoom out to see what those look like. This is where my Wi-Fi starts to play up, because I think after 5, everyone turns on Netflix and my Wi-Fi just seems to go. Let me just zoom in again. There we are. Let me just turn on a couple of these data layers so you can have a look. Some designations, national parks, etc. I'm hoping one of these will load. I need to refresh my screen. Classic. Bear with me. There we are. That's looking better. Okay, so we've got lots of data layers that people can turn on. You can load up different habitat layers, overlay them, different opportunity layers, etc. And all of the data that we host within the land app is vector data. So if I click on a shape, it's not raster, so it contains information that, you know, what is that shape. So for example, I've clicked on Shropshire Hills A, O, and B. Not only is that saying what the area it is, but also we can contain information within that vector parcel. So if I wanted to know more about the Shropshire Hills A, O, and B, I can do that. And the same with the source information as well. So all that data is being stored as vector, which gives our users more insight about what's happening. But just to quickly, as I was getting distracted by bad internet, just to quickly show you what this baselining looks like, is that Ordnance Survey have already got a lot of information. So say I've drawn a bounding box on my map, Ordnance Survey can already tell me where the inland water is and where the agricultural land is and where the non-conifer trees are, etc. But what the question was is actually, look, if I look in this field, there's a lot more features there. You know, there's more to what's on the ground than what master map's saying. Yes, it's agricultural land, but it's made up of other things that are benefiting. So the rapid prototyping team have basically started deriving with the satellite imagery vector data that's automatically created from the images themselves. So rather than relying on master map to create the shapes, starting to rely on rendering those images into shapes. Now we're very much in the first stage of this project, where actually we need training data for the images to know whether that's a woodland that's conifer, or that's a woodland that's broadleaf, or that's a calcareous grassland, or a modified grassland, or a different type of pond. So actually the first stage of the pilot is we give our ecology friends, so ecologists that use the land app, we give them an empty map that looks like this, and they just use the land app to play color by numbers to basically say, oh, I know that's oak woodland. They can then assign those shapes the habitat that they are, but by assigning the shapes on the land app, our API service automatically sends back to Ordnance Survey that attribution. So Ordnance Survey can start to build up a database of the raster image in the background, so the what this woodland looks like from space, with what the ecologist on the floor says, on the ground says it is, to then start building up a database of next time they run it, there's a chance that they might be able to detect what's what. So this is really exciting. This is first couple of stages of the project. There's lots of other data we want to get in, and I'm sure you've had talks before, around LiDAR data, around infrared and ultrasound, and there's so much more tech we can bring into this. But what we're trying to do as a tool is make it super accessible for the everyday farmer to get involved in that type of process. So we're almost a window into that data. Once you know what you've got, then just to keep the presentation moving, is you want to plan what you want to do next. So you've understood your current habitats, you've understood the extent of them, what crops you're growing, but what you really want to know is, right, how do I then improve my sustainability, improve the the habitats that I create, or the connectivity? So we've also got the ability for people to create these land management plans. And actually the image you can see is Tim, our founder's family farm, and this is just one of the scenarios for what he was interested in looking at. So we used the land app, and we basically took his field parcels from the RPA, and we've kind of doodled on the land app to say what could be there instead. So if it's blank, it means that there's going to be no change in that field. So these two fields are currently grazed by sheep, not going to change the habitat at all. But what he is going to do potentially in this field is do a bit of mob grazing. So mob grazing meaning you move the sheep more often instead of just having them on the field all at one time. You can move them between paddocks, which then naturally encourages the grass to grow better and prevents overgrazing. So just by dividing that field into 7 or 6, can't count, sorry, dividing it into 6, we can encourage the sheep not to overgraze and keep them moving naturally. Other things, agroforestry, planting trees in your farming landscape has a huge amount of benefit. So you're not taking this field out of production, but what you are doing is you're providing those sheep with shelter in, Tim had a lot of snow, I think this year or last. If there were trees here, which at the moment is pretty open, pretty bare, those sheep would be healthier. They would have somewhere to hide in the high winds and the snow, and therefore shiver less and produce higher meat content, for example. So using nature to benefit your farm is stuff that we're really trying to promote. Agroforestry is a really great way of doing that. mob grazing is another great way of doing it. I think Tim's mum is interested in doing some vegetable growing. I think they've got a little allotment here, but they want to extend that, which is exciting. And other things, scrub enhancement, wetland creation. Basically, if it's got a spatial location on the land app, you can map it. You can say what you want it to become or what it currently is. And the difference between those two things, currently this is a lucerne field, so it's just a high protein rich fodder for racehorses, for example. And that's what state A is. But actually what state B could be is delivering so much more than that. It could be sequestering carbon and biodiversity through agroforestry. It could be enriching its biodiversity through scrub enhancement and its soil health, et cetera, through a herbal lake. And fundamentally what this tool, the land app, allows you to do is just try different scenarios. There's not actually one right answer for any field. There could be 5, 10, 100 different ways that field could look in 20 years, but it's really important that the landowners have sight about what impact that could have if they go down one route rather than the other. And spatial data allows you to really scenario plan in that. The other quite exciting avenue that I'm not going to spend too much time on is business rules. So at the moment in the system, from experience, I used to be an agricultural advisor in Gloucestershire. In using the paper-based system, I could be submitting an application to government that says I want to plant a hedgerow here, for example, along this line, draw it on my map or with a pencil, submit a spreadsheet to say where I want it. And it could take about 6 months before it comes back and goes, computer says no, because it was on a triple SI or there was a reason that you can't put a hedgerow there. Fundamentally, using a tool like the land app, we can at the source, as soon as the user draws a hedgerow there, tell them that it can't go there because of whatever reason. So by implementing the business rules right at the source, we speed up the whole administration process. Waiting 6 months to get told that something is ineligible slows down the whole system. And actually in a climate emergency and an ecological emergency, we need things to happen quickly. And then finally, this secure funding. We've already secured funding for countryside stewardship for the last couple of years for lots of users. People draft their countryside stewardship and apply to government on an individual level. But what we really want to do is people to come up with a plan that works for them. But we also want them, I forgot I had that slide in. I'll come back to that. But they fundamentally want to design with a plan that works at a collaborative level. And actually, just as a quick note, one exciting bit of development we've had is with Wild East, our partner. We've created an automatic land management plan. So we're basically saying, we know where you are, we know where your existing hedgerows are. Let's just add a buffer to every hedgerow and see what happens. We're not taking out any productive land in this process. This is what we're calling a wild edge. Basically, every existing hedgerow gets a 3-meter buffer and then another 3-meter buffer either side of that. Let's see how much extra habitat we can create while also not actually eating into much food producing area. And actually, I think on here as well, I've done that. Let's just have a quick look at, there we are. So just to show you what that looks like is if this farm followed the wild edge principle, it could create all these extra habitats. So they could still graze in here, but at an ecological level, connectivity, so your average mammal, for example, can connect through the farm. All your watercourses get buffered, but your hedgerows are just getting extended through rewilding, but you're not actually rewilding the field, you're just looking after that edge habitat. And ecologically, edge habitats where fundamentally a lot of species spend their time. Beaches are popular because it's on the brink between sea and land. The scrub corridors, hedgerows are popular with birds because it's between grass and the actual hedge where there's protection. Having edge habitat is really almost more important than a closed canopy woodland. So I'm really excited about seeing where this project goes. We're going to do a bit of a big launch in January, February next year, where we're just going to allow landowners to automatically get this produced for them on the tool. And not only do they see what it looks like, how their farm could look, but also they can really quickly, using the tool, report back on how much habitat that would create. So for example, on this example, 65 hectares of extra habitat could be created just if this one farm decided to go down the wild edge route. And that's only using up about 4 or 5% of their total available land. Spatial data allows that to happen really quickly. And we've been working with algorithms to make that a thing. So that's our wild edges. Then what the tool does is it allows people to really quickly and easily collaborate. So I said earlier, the scheme's changing, people are getting paid to deliver environmental benefit. You can't get better environmental benefit if multiple people have got the same objective. So if people are looking to see if their wildflower corridors connect or their hedgerows connect or their wild edges connect, we're going to get a lot more benefit from that. And our tool allows that to happen really quite quickly and easily. But fundamentally, what we're also trying to do with spatial data is bring in professionals. Navigating this minefield of what's the best use for my land is quite difficult, especially for a farmer that's also got to pay the bills, grow food, look after kids, etc., etc. And so what we're really trying to do is bring in as many accredited advisors, so people that have been trained and upskilled to sign off management plans, to make sure that the schemes that are being delivered are as effective as possible. And you need to think that these accredited advisors don't only understand what's happening in this local area, because most of them are probably really local, but also they have in their back of their head what's the national strategy, what is the most important thing, is it carbon, is it biodiversity, is it a happy medium between the both. And one of my final slides before I'm going to do a quick 5-minute fly through of the land app in full is that what spatial data allows for is it allows for people to firstly create a land management plan that works for them. And this is actually a slide that I presented to Treasury last week. But they need a land management plan that works for the sustainable farm incentive, which is the basic level of entry. Don't worry about the language, but it's basically a basic level of applying for funding from the government. But if we get it right, that farmer only needs to make one land management plan. But that one land management plan can fit into a wider farm group to deliver more ambitious goals. Because to a farmer, they don't mind where the funding's coming from. All they need is direction and understanding about what impact it's going to have, either positive or negative, on their farming business. But what spatial data can do is make that a really quite simple process. Tim told me an analogy the other day, which I thought was quite good. The climate situation we're in is like a massive ship that we need to turn around, right? Everything needs to move. But actually, if you think of the climate issue as a set of Venetian blinds, instead of it being one long ship that you have to turn, it's actually a big blind that's blocking out the sun. But all you need to do is flick a couple of switches and everything flips in their own individual section. We're going to get that change we need a lot quicker. And I think what we're really trying to push here is actually every farm in the UK or internationally just needs a good land management plan. They need a plan about how their little piece of the jigsaw makes a difference. And fundamentally, that whole Venetian blind switches. I think that's quite a nice analogy. So just before I come on to my final slide, which is kind of questions, I just wanted to show you just a couple more things that the land app does, because I know we've got a lot of cartographic people on the tool. We're an Ordnance Survey distributor of data, so people can buy data through us. And just to show you what that process looks like, we've got a little shopping cart for buy data. You can buy master map, and let's just say I wanted to buy the master map for this area, like so. That will automatically calculate your quote. So here's my quote. So this can be my British Cartographic demo, and then demo. And what we then do is we then serve the vector data back to the user, so they can not only begin their baseline mapping or whatever on RPA data, they can also start to base their mapping on authoritative master map data if they so wish. So let me just zoom into that and turn off the labels. And actually, let's go for a slightly better base map, Ordnance Survey Lite. So there's the vector data that I've just purchased from Ordnance Survey, and that delivers it in a format that they can use and create their cropping plans on, but also that it's in a format that allows them to really quickly and readily summarize their total area in terms of what does Ordnance Survey thinks within my area. So that's why I've just purchased 137 hectares of data, and there's 0.29 hectares of buildings, for example. And then the final thing before we come on to questions, and I can see there's one that's come through the chat, but if there's any questions or anything else you want me to demo, let me know, is we're collaborative, as I said. So we work just like Google Sheets. So this is a demo map, but I can, within my collaborative space, invite people like, I invite Glenn. Glenn as a read only, which means they can come in and just view my data. As an editor, which means they can come in, view, amend, delete data. Or we've released a third level of permission, which is a publisher, which allows that user, so I give Glenn permission to access my data through an API and send it to an external database. Now, why that's important is that means that if we have more people moving into this infrastructure, we can actually all run off one source of truth. So if, for example, if a farmer's got their baseline and their land management plan, and that management plan and that baseline is contributing not only to their priorities, but to their local council's priorities and DEFRA's priorities and a local farm group's priorities, that farmer can actually invite all those 4 organizations as a publisher, and they can then receive a copy of the data. But because it's on an API, if they made a change to their baseline or a change to their plan, everyone receives an updated copy of that data. So gone are the days where we needed to share that GeoJSON or that shapefile manually so people could see what it is. APIs are unlocking for the everyday landowner the ability for them to share their aspirations to people who are interested to see it. But then they can also be dynamic. I can change where I want that hedgerow or where I want that woodland or whatever it might be, to maintain that dynamism that the sector really needs in this state of emergency. So I'm actually just going to pause there. I've hit the half an hour mark, which is great. If there's anything you want me to demo on the Land app, happy to show you it. There's a whole host of other functions. I would say it's free but we run on a freemium model. So we've basically got about 45% of England farmland on the software. About 80% of those are part of a free product that we offer. And so most things I've been showing you for free, and then 20% pay as a subscription. And under that subscription model, you have access to the APIs, you have access to more data, etc. But what I would recommend, if interested, do have a play. If you've got an SBI number, you can import data from the RPA. If you want to buy OS data, you can buy it through us. And if you do get stuck, we do have a little in-app chat function, which means you can either search some of our help articles, or you can just drop us a message and one of the customer support team will help you, regardless if you're paid or not. So thank you so much for listening, and yeah, happy to take questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan, for that. That's been a very interesting series, very interesting topic, and toolkits. First question: do you have an example of case studies?
Yes, Jim, good question. Yeah, we've got lots of case studies happening, and actually I think I could actually show you. Let me just go behind the scenes just quickly and log on to my account. But we're basically on that wild edge idea. We're working with an estate up in Chester. Let me find here. So Chumley Estate. What we're working with is they've got a group of 16 tenants. What we've done is we've done a baseline for all of them. We've done a land management plan for all of them. This is the estate, but using our API service, we can actually see what would happen if the whole, so this is just the main estate. We can see what would happen if all the tenants also put in their land management plan to do a wild edge. So what we're doing as a case study is, well, how much, and this is the question, is how much would the farmer have to be paid for this wild edge to cover the loss of basic payment? So if this wild edge was the only intervention they had to do to cover the loss of subsidy from Brexit, how much would it cost how much would they have to be paid per year to do that? I think it's a really interesting question, and it really depends on field size. So you can see here, this field, it's about 10% of the field parcel that's been eaten up by a wild edge, whereas over here, it's about 2%. And therefore the question is fundamentally unanswered without spatial data. And so we're really just playing with numbers, playing with ideas and concepts as a case study to demonstrate to either DEFRA or the private market, look, this is an ecologically important project, but also financially for the farmer, this could be a really nice transition to helping them meet that objective as well. So as a case study, I think it's a really nice packaged up piece that I'm looking forward to seeing what the answers are.
Okay. Right, thank you very much then. Right, we've got questions coming in thick and fast now. So another question. For everyone creating their cropping plans, I assume they have standard symbology, colors, etc. Did you develop these? Are they open, shared, international?
Good question. So the answer to the question is yes, we have default styling. And actually, I probably should have said is we run completely on project templates. So unlike QGIS and ArcGIS, the only thing a user can do if they want to be fully free is use a blank template. But what we do is we steer our users, depending on what their workflow is, to use a predefined template. And each of those templates have got their own styling. So the basic payment scheme, which is the English application to this, pre-Brexit thing that's fading out, has its own color scheme, which you can see on here. So that's all open source. That was provided by the Rural Payment Agency. And just to show you, if I were to change woodland to barley, I will click it back. That's got its own color code. And it's exactly the same with the UK habitat classification. So it's not owned by the Land App. So this schema, which I think is okay, I think it could be improved. This schema, styling, sorry, has predefined by UK Hab. So we're just following their guidance. However, if a user does want to get a bit arty and say they don't like this orange, we give them the ability to change the style in the left-hand side. So you can change the, this symbology, the pattern, you can really, if you want to be more creative with your color schemes and borders, we do give them the ability to, but fundamentally we do have this reset style button, which means if you don't like what you've done, you can go back to what it was originally.
Okay, nice answer on that one. Right. Okay, here's another interesting one. How do you handle data being updated by OS? For example, new roads or developments?
Yep, great question. So the Ordnance Survey data is all via their API. So as I was saying, it's that live data sharing from source to whoever wants to access it. So the base map, which you can see, we've got 3 different OS base maps. They are through the Data Hub, which I'm sure they'd love me to give a shout out. The OS Data Hub is basically a live API, which means that we get raster data sent from them. As soon as it updates, we get the updated copy. And then for that vector purchase that I showed you, that too is connected through an API. However, when we serve it to the user, it becomes static, and they buy the license for 12 months. They're entitled to the updated vector, but they have to request it manually from us. So if they know something's changed, they can request it from us. But actually asking a lot of our users that 12 months license, they kind of don't want the OS data to change, especially if they've done a planning application on one thing and then they, 6 months down the line, OS updates slightly where the road was. So we do have access to live data. Raster, it's completely live. Vector, it only updates when requested by the user back to us, but we always serve the most up-to-date data as soon as we get it.
Okay, right. Another question here: what mechanism do you have to consult with farmers?
Yep, good question. We personally don't, where possible, consult directly with farmers. We hope that the platform is used by professionals that consult with farmers. As the Land App, we're a team of 5 people. We're not a big organization. We're just a small collective that created a tool, and we work with partners. So if, for example, we got a message about, and a farmer was like, I've designed a land management plan, do you think it's good? We would then go to our partner network and say, speak to this organization. So we very much work with people that represent farmers more than the individual farmers. Not to say that farmers can't use the tool, though. Hopefully, Arthur, that answered your question. If not, let us know.
Right. So another question here. What is planted in the wild edges?
Julian, so the great thing about wild edges is absolutely nothing is planted. It's all relying on the regeneration of the existing habitat. So we're basically putting it along existing hedgerows, because if you stop flailing a hedgerow and give it a bit of breathing space, it will expand. Blackthorn will start encroaching and grasses will get longer. So actually at the moment, we're not looking to plant anything. And that's why at a cost benefit, it makes a lot of sense. You just move the fence posts, flail it at 6 meters rather than on its doorstep. You get that encroachment, but you can do semi what do they call it, semi-natural rewilding, I think is the term, where actually you go and if you've got a couple of species that you really want to see, you go and chuck some seeds or some plants in as well. But yeah, actually for the wild edges, we're not expecting to plant anything. We're just going to use natural regeneration to cover.
Okay. Right. Okay. A bit of a longer question here. It's the great presentation, Dan. Understanding how land can be used in the future is really essential when the baseline is understood, how the land is used at the moment. But have you thought how recent historical cropping or land use could be useful in influencing how the land is used in the future and how valuable it is? Can this be easily incorporated into the Land App?
Yeah, really great question, Henry. And partly, yes, we've already done it, and partly it's definitely possible. So this is one data set which hints at what you're talking about, which is where the current agricultural land classifications are. So the green being grade 3, grade 2 being blue, and grade 4. I don't know if we've got any grade 1. That's urban. It's not. There's no grade 1 in my shop. This might be it. Oh no, that's grade 5. Wrong direction. But yeah, understanding the historical implications and the historical land use is really important. Included in that is when you download from the Rural Payment Agency, you can request about historical cropping. So actually, one of the benefits of doing the basic payment scheme submission is annually, every year for the last 25 years, every farmer who wants to access that £200 a hectare has said exactly what crop they're growing, exactly where every year. So that data set is actually available and it is open. So the crop map of England you can request. So what's the historical cropping, which actually feeds really nicely into natural capital assessments into the future, which don't want to get too bogged down onto it. But it can definitely, the answer to your question is, Henry, yes, can be incorporated. But we are a relatively small team and we do pick and choose our battles. But if the historical cropping data would be fundamental to your workflow, drop us a message in the in-app chat. And the more people that request certain things, the more likely it is to happen.
Okay. Comprehensive, and you answered it, and you'd already done it. Right. So another question. I think you've partially answered this one. How many employees are you? Are you all from a mapping background or agricultural background, or a bit of both?
It's definitely the latter, a bit of both. So there's kind of two. There's the core land app team, so employed by the land app. There's now 5 of us, or maybe 6. And we're hiring 2 more in the new year. So we're going up to 7 or 8. And one of them is a geospatial analyst, which I'm super excited about. I'm conducting the interviews next week, which will be good. So we're a small team, but we subcontract out the actual development work to Spirosoft, which are an international GIS company. So although we're the land that we contract developers, so a lot of the GIS know-how and knowledge comes from our contractors, and we are more the practitioners that steer the product. We're like, this would be useful. So yeah, agricultural background. I'm a zoology graduate, did agricultural advice for 3 years, and then have come into the software. We've got some recent graduates. We've got some people that used to be diplomats. And we've got one diplomat, Tim, who started this tool, actually graduated in regenerative agriculture and permaculture. So farming background, farming families, conservation, but gone into the tech because we realize it's useful. And I think Tim's plan was always come up with an idea and then hire the intelligent GIS people to turn it into a reality. And, it's credit to him and the team really for that.
Okay, yeah, that's very clear. Quite a mix of people you've got there. Okay, so, and yeah, another question. It's presumably some areas run alongside rights of way. They apologize if they've missed it, but are they marked up as not being available for wild edges?
Yeah, really good question. So the public right of way, we do have that data set on here as well. There we are. There's a little crisscrossing public rights of way that you can vector data as well. So as wild edges go, the way that the algorithm works is it starts with blue sky thinking. It goes, if everyone did a wild edge and there was no constraints, where would the wild edges go? And then we eat away at that complete data to say where actually it doesn't work. An entrance to a field that the tractor drives through, you can't have a wild edge there, for example. Public rights of way and styles, for example, can't have a wild edge because of public access. So there's these constraints and these if/or clauses that we put on that algorithm that mean that the wild edge that's generated isn't just saying add buffers to hedge, it's adding buffers to hedge, but it's also only adding it in agricultural land. It's not going to cover a public right of way. It's not going to cover a gate. And so I don't know how many clauses there are in it now. We're just building them up. But yeah, absolutely. That, it's not just let's rewild everything. It's where does logically make sense based on the data we have. And the model's not perfect. There's still a lot of things we want to integrate it with, but at least at a first provocative level, getting the conversation happening, it's there. But yeah, really good point.
Okay. So we have another question here. It's just, what is your business model?
What is our business model? Yep, we get asked this quite often. So we are a fully private company. We are we're independently invested in by landowners. So all of our investment is come from landowners in the UK. And we run on a freemium model. So a lot of relatively new software companies, software as services, SaaS companies, they run in a similar principle, which is freemium, which means we offer a free product, which means people can come and map, use the software, get to like it. And then it's our job to encourage them to subscribe for a monthly fee. So our subscriptions start at, I think, if it's an individual on their own, it's £15 a month. If you're more than one of you, it's £5 each a month, just for like the basic level. And that introduces some other bits and bobs. Plus, as we're a licensed seller of Ordnance Survey data, we also get royalties for selling Ordnance Survey data, whether that's printing, distribution licenses we sell for 12 months, or the OS Topo licenses. And gosh, I'm sure someone on the call will know this better. Paul Naylor, I saw you on the call. I'm sure you could explain licenses a bit better. Plus, there's other transactional costs as well. If people want to print or generate, we can do spatial query reports. So how many data layers does my farm intersect? We can sell that. So there's little different touch points. That's how our salaries are paid, plus projects as well.
Okay. We have another question. Is what have you assessed what impact the raster data detail might have on the accuracy of the area values, particularly your linear buffered areas, especially where wooded borders open field?
Yeah, give me a moment to reread that question. Impact the raster accuracy of the area. So I think, Sepe, this is referring to the wild edges. If not, let us know. So during the presentation, the only time that we actually use raster data to generate area insight is during that rapid prototyping team from the Earth observation. Everything else is running off vector data. So the wild edges is running off vector GeoJSON files generated by the Rural Payment Agency to generate those wild edges. So the hedge lines, for example, are vector data from the RPA, and we add a buffer to those. And then linear buffer areas, accuracy of the area values. So the accuracy of it, even though the raster base map, there might be slight discrepancies, the vector data that sits on that is what we interact with. So hopefully that's correct. I'm not sure if I've answered that question well, but yeah, in terms of the actual accuracy of so when you draw a shape on the land app, let's just draw a random rectangle, you can be quite bespoke. Let's turn it into meters squared. It does go into quite a degree of accuracy. So 2 decimal places on the meter squared of accuracy. So you can draw a shape of 0.2 meters by, and this is all on British National Grid projection. So we hope, I think the short answer is as accurate as Ordnance Survey's data is. It's probably a short way of saying it. So if Ordnance Survey have got it right, we have, and if they've got it wrong, well, we'll revert you to their customer side.
Okay, right. So here's another question. Did you say that ROW are vectors? If yes, where did you get the vectors from?
Yes, so they are. I think Highways England have the open source data. I'm actually going to check. Where's my access? Okay, public right. There should be a source link attached to it. There's a public right of way. So yeah, you can click on those public rights of way, and even I can copy the shape of that public right of way to my project if I want. But that is from various local authorities aggregated. So our dev team there we are. I can give you this link if you want. There's the right of way vector data. I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, that was a very quick answer and solution for anyone that wants to have a look at that as well. Okay, so I have to say it's been a very, very, very interesting talk and interesting demo of everything that the Land app does. So thanks. Okay, we've got a thanks for the answer. Potential, yeah, and it's just a potential real problem if you get to merge polys derived from imagery. So again, a great talk. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that there.
Thanks for the heads up about raster data. I'm hoping our friends at Ordnance Survey will help us eliminate or reduce errors. But I think the main message to get across is, currently the land management sector is stuck in paper maps. And the reason is its accessibility. So even if we can move people to paper maps, even if it's not perfectly accurate, it's a whole lot more accurate than what they're currently using. And that's why we're really trying to push it.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. I'll just finish us off now. And so I'll say once again, thank you to everyone for joining us. And thank you, Dan, for the interesting talk and demo. It's been just interesting seeing another application and how it's used. So our next talk will be from David Sharon, where he'll be speaking about how mazes appear on maps. So we look forward to seeing you all in the future. Also, I want to say thank you and goodbye. And Merry Christmas to everyone as well. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.